you try that and you're not duly sworn with a court order, you're violating the law and you'll be arrested for impersonating the law officer. That's all that means. But I don't expect that to happen.
Governor Mead?
Well, I think it's a poor way to get attention to say you're going to drill in Yellowstone National Park and then say you don't intend to. I mean, and on top of that, you know, the idea that you're going to arrest employees, you know, we have, last count, I think 16, 17,000 federal employees. These are not strangers. They're our brothers or sisters or wives or cousins. And I don't think that that threat is healthy for the state. I don't think it's healthy, and I don't think it's you're going to arrest all these people. And I think it's a bizarre thing. And then when you talk about, you know, drilling in Yellowstone, you know, that's a First National Park. And I've read that Dr. Haynes has said that he thinks the national parks are a scam. I disagree with that. I'm proud that Wyoming has the First National Park. I'm proud we have Grand Teton National Park. I'm proud we have the First National Monument, the First National Forest. Those are things I'm proud of. I'm not going to go arrest all the people that help provide that to the state of Wyoming. So that's a fundamental disagreement, and I think it's irresponsible to say you're going to do that.
This next question is for Governor Mead, and it comes from Marilyn Fisher of Torrington. She asks, what areas do you believe it is important to compromise or negotiate with the federal government or other political parties in this state to serve all of the people of Wyoming?
Well, I think that it is the role of governor to serve all the citizens. And in my role as governor, I meet with people who completely disagree with me on an issue or agree with me, whether it's Republican, Democrat, or none of the above. And I think that is the role of a governor. And I also think it's the history of Wyoming governors is to be able to meet with and discuss and serve all the people of the state of Wyoming. I think that is paramount. And in terms of areas of compromise and area of success, you know, when I say the number of lawsuits that I've had the Attorney General file against the federal government, it's because we feel strongly about those. But it's not for a lack of trying. And we can have success. You know, for example, I worked with Secretary Salazar one-on-one and in group meetings on the issue of wolves and having wolves delisted in Wyoming. And we had success on doing that. We finally got the state forward after many, many years of not going forward. We reached an agreement. The same is true with regard to sage grouse. And the recent RMP, Record of Decision, in Lander, that was work hand in hand with people who didn't always agree with us, but we got to a point where the federal government was accepting what we were doing and the leadership that we had in Wyoming. I think that is you always have to look for those opportunities to move forward in a positive fashion. It doesn't happen as often as I want, and when it doesn't, then you see that the last resort is the lawsuits that we have, and we have to do that as well. But to say that you're going to be governor and you're going to arrest people and you're not going to put, that's how you're going to deal with people that disagree with you or work for a different government, that is not a way to get cooperative efforts.
Well, I would only arrest people that violate the law. Let's understand that, because I am the chief law enforcement officer in this state. Now, as far as compromise, if compromise means I sell out my ranchers for sage grouse, if compromise means I sell out my miners over haze, if compromise means I sell out my communities for refugees who are not of our culture, who may bring in diseases, who many have been war-torn since birth, many of whom are terrorists, guys, I'm not going to compromise. Now, I have the most senior executive experience of anybody to sit in that chair since I lived in this state. I do a lot of good things in the boardroom with people that disagree with me. I've met with people on this campaign who disagree with me about everything, but I share their point of views. I let them tell me to my face what they disagree with. So if compromise means roll over and let you guys be sold down the river, I'm not going to compromise. Thank you.
Before we move on to the next round of questioning, I just want to remind everybody in our studio audience that if you have a follow-up question for one of the candidates tonight, please write it down on a piece of paper that you were provided with on the way in. Hold it up in the air, and it will be collected for you. Try to finish up within the next couple of questions, so people in the back have time to give you a call. We're going to move on to the state budget. First question is for Dr. Haynes. Dr. Haynes, Wyoming has billions in reserve funding or rainy day accounts. If that money was available to you, you could spend it. What would you do with it?
Well, first of all, when the rainy day account was set up, the goal was to have a biennium in the bank, and I think that's a very good idea. However, the pace at which we're trying to get there may be unreasonable. What I think the wealth of this state is for the cities, towns, and counties. And I would like to see that money distributed for infrastructure needs, not for corporate welfare, not for my buddies, but for infrastructure need. Because infrastructure, including IT, as the governor mentioned, infrastructure is the key to economic opportunity. So I would like to see that money go to infrastructure. There are a couple of programs that are neglected. There are a couple of groups that are neglected. Mental health is woefully underserved. Juvenile justice is woefully underserved in this state and misserved. So I would look at those things, but basically I'd like to see that money go to the cities, towns, and counties for infrastructure. The earnings.
Well, I think you have to have a balanced approach in terms of investment, and it's a legitimate discussion in terms of how much do we have in savings, and then how much do we spend in terms of getting back to local government on the infrastructure. And in that, we see that the permanent savings and the temporary savings have served us well. It's one of the big part, the interest from that serves us in terms of our revenue. So to answer your question, what would I do with it? I wouldn't spend it all. I would continue to put some back in savings. Even last session, after I prepared my budget, I had $200 million that I left on the table for the legislature to consider for savings. Those are the types of things I would do. But if you look in terms of infrastructure and you think about Wyoming as a stock and you see the strength of Wyoming, I'm betting on Wyoming, and we've got to invest in Wyoming, and that's why you see the record amounts that we have been putting back to local government, and I'll continue to do that because no jobs are created in the capital. We don't live in the capital. It's at the local level. Roads, sewer, water, bridges, we have to have those strong, and so we've made some significant investments getting some of that money, a large portion of money, back to local governments, and I'll continue to do that.
Next question is for you, Governor. Is a toll charge on interstate highways necessary to keep our roads maintained? Why or why not?
Did you say a toll charge?
Yes.
No, I don't think it is. And as we looked at how we're going to fund our roads, a couple of things that came to mind. The idea of a toll road certainly is a way to look at revenue, but I just don't like the image of it in terms of when you first hit Wyoming, rather than welcome to wonderful Wyoming, you hit the pay window. I worry about that. And so what we did as we looked at what we were with the revenue, and in terms of gas tax, fuel tax, as you know, I work with the legislature, and we raised the fuel tax 10 cents. We're still about the lowest in the region, say for one or two states. But what we had seen is since the fuel tax had raised, inflation had cut the efficiency of that fund by about 50%. In other words, inflation had cut that away. And if you believe in infrastructure, you also have to say, where's the money going to come from? And so we think we made a responsible decision on that. But I wouldn't go the way of toll roads. I think we made the right choice with regard to the fuel tax. And we see, as of today, the average fuel price at the pump is less than it was before the fuel tax. And so it has provided about $70 million to the state. A significant amount of that goes back to local government. I think it was the right decision. I think that was the right way to go. But I would not go with the toll road.
Dr. Haynes.
I agree with no toll road, but I disagree with the 10% fuel tax. You see, we're gouging our people for funds that we actually need, while the federal government robs us of 51% of our mineral wealth. But that's just scratching the surface, looking back at the status quo. When we allow our natural resource industries to flourish, when we allow those producers who have paid for thousands of drilling permits that they're not allowed to develop, when we allow that to flourish, the state coffers will be full. We'll have money from earnings to take care of our infrastructure, including our roads. So we don't need 10% fuel tax, and we certainly don't need a toll road. Thank you.
Dr. Haynes, the next question is for you. As governor, how would you lead to resolve the funding shortfall at Wyoming Game and Fish?
As governor, I don't see a funding shortfall at Wyoming Game and Fish. I see mission creep. Wyoming Game and Fish has outgrown its mission to take care of game, fish, and bird animals. They're chasing endangered and threatened species with federal people in the background. I want to get rid of that. I want to take them back to their initial mission, just managing the game, birds, game, fish, and game animals in this state. So I don't think it's a budget shortfall. I think they got too much mission.
Governor Mead, your rebuttal.
Well, I think the Game and Fish mission is important, and I'm pleased that they're working on endangered species because they weren't working on it. The only people that would be working on it is the federal government. We have great expertise in our game and fish, and I think it is an appropriate area. It's through their work that we were able to get wolves delisted. It's going to be through their work that we're going to be able to get grizzly bears delisted. Those are things that are real solutions that we need our people in Wyoming working on. And so I don't think it is mission creep. What I have done in the past, this past session, is I asked for some additional general fund money on it because as they work on issues of grizzly bears, sage grouse, the wolves, they have some more demand. So I just fundamentally disagree with the doctor's view that there's mission creep. And I have said, because they support not just recreation and hunting and fishing, they support so many of us and provide a quality of life that we want to make sure Game and Fish remains on a good track in terms of their strength.
All right, this next category contains some social issues and then another smattering of questions that didn't quite fit into any category. So, first of all, for Governor Mead, Wyoming is the only state in the nation without a refugee resettlement center. Some have been advocating for such a program. Would you support its creation, and why or why not?
Well, we wrote to the federal government and said we want to look at this as a state. We are the only state that doesn't have one. And figure out your most conservative governor in the country, they have one. Wyoming's the only one that doesn't. And so, one is, it's not a refugee camp. And two, for the doctor to say we're bringing in refugees is false. We're not bringing on any refugees. Count the number of refugees we have brought in under my administration, 0. But having said that, what we do know is you can't put your head in the sand. We see refugees who are coming to the state. Maybe they're secondary refugees. For example, we have folks who work in Greeley, Colorado, but they may live in Wyoming. What services are they using? Where do they come from? Who are they? What are the challenges that they face or they may provide to a community? We wanted to know that information. And so we wrote to the federal government and said we're interested in looking at this. And we are looking at it. And whether or not we go forward with it or not, I don't know. But we have to be aware, and we can't just say, hey, that's a good thing to sort of put a negative spin on and draw up this negative connotations with what's going on. The fact is we're the only state that doesn't have it. The fact is, it's something that we don't close our borders down and say, hey, we're going to check everybody on the border of Wyoming and see whether or not you're a refugee or not. We have to be living in the real world. And so we're trying to figure out that information. And that's where we're headed now. And we'll decide whether or not we're going to have refugee resettlement or not, which is most often sponsored by local churches. But at least we need to know what's going on in Wyoming. And that's the primary purpose we want to look at it.
Dr. Haynes.
Thank you. Well, I don't think they're refugees either. I think they're groups of people being brought in to kill labor and undermine our culture. The problem is this. 60% of those folks, according to the CDC, have TB. 85% of that 60% have multi-drug resistant TB. The ones from Central and Eastern Africa may have Ebola, may have HIV, may have known violence since they were children. So if we want to be humanitarian, and as a Christian, my heart goes out to those people. But if we want to be humanitarian, we send Doctors Without Borders, we send medical aid, we send food to the refugee camps in the countries where they fled to, where the cultures are similar to theirs. Solving their problem, there's over 1 billion people on the planet in that situation. We can't bring them here. We have to solve their problems for them and help them solve their problems in their own countries. I pray for those folks every day. But as your governor, I will protect you from that sort of thing. Thank you.
Dr. Haynes, some advocates for the poor believe Wyoming has a homelessness problem. Does the state have a responsibility to the homeless? And if so, what shape would that responsibility take?
The state, especially a Judeo-Christian ethic people, have a responsibility to the homeless. Part of the homeless problem goes back to the lack of really good mental illness services that I talked about earlier. If we address mental illness, you take care of part of the homeless problem. When they were turned out because they should be free, many people who need supervision and help are now in the streets. I think if we had community-based mental health, community-based disability services, I think it goes a long way towards helping the homeless problem. And not only is our responsibility to them, our responsibility to the rest of the citizens in the community, so that they don't cause a problem just trying to survive. So we should do the right thing for the homeless.
Well, it was about 1.5 years ago we started a program in Wyoming to try to reduce homelessness within a 10-year period. And that not only is a good mission, it also helps the homeless shelters in Wyoming be more competitive in terms of what they can do. And when we did that, we recognized that we do have, in Wyoming, unfortunately, we do have those who are homeless. And when I said I want to try to reduce this and have a 10-year plan to end homelessness in Wyoming, we got started on it. And we didn't say we're going to help those who don't have disease. If they have disease or if they're from another country, we're not going to help them. We said homelessness is an issue in Wyoming, and we want to look at it.
Governor Mead, now, you're both Republicans, and the GOP in Wyoming is facing a rift between different factions, with some Republicans going so far as to censure the sitting governor and legislators. How do you view the state of the Wyoming GOP, and what will you do about it?
Well, I think it's because we are so overwhelmingly Republican state. There's sort of no such thing as a supermajority. I mean, the larger you get, you're always going to have factions within the party. And I think that what we should say is, rather than this to have different points of view is a bad thing, we think about President Reagan and his Big Ten idea, that it is not unhealthy to have a marketplace of ideas. It's not unhealthy for people to have disagreement. But when you start saying, if you disagree with me, then you're out of the tent, pretty soon it's going to be a pup tent with one person in it. We've got to be able, as a Republican Party, to be able to recognize those differences, debate those differences, and recognize that in that we can have the best idea come forward. So I think it is something the party can and will work through, and I don't necessarily think it's unhealthy.
Dr. Haynes?
I agree with Matt that it's not unhealthy, and I don't describe it as a rift. What I describe it as is a very healthy, passionate, ongoing debate about what the Wyoming Republican Party is and what our direction is. And the stark differences between Matt and I, for sure, give the people a choice. And the choice the people make on August 19th will determine the future and the direction of the Republican Party. But I agree that that's a very healthy debate to have.
Now, Dr. Haynes, you've presented yourself as a strong supporter of gun rights and also an advocate for individuals to own military-grade weapons if they could afford it. Now, if it were up to you, could individuals possess a nuclear weapon? If not, what's the most powerful weapon an individual should legally possess?
Well, you have to answer the question reasonably. Obviously, there are no individuals that could own a nuclear weapon. It's not possible because even Bill Gates couldn't produce all of the steps that you need to own a nuclear weapon. But basically, when you read the Constitution, the founding documents, and the Federalist Papers, when they want you to have the same grade weapon that the military have, they're mostly talking about rifles. So 308 in caliber or better is what most citizens should have. If you can afford more than that, I'm fine with that. I'm just fine with that. And I'm not concerned about anybody out there having a nuke. They're my friend.
Well, I think it's, I think Dr. Haynes has answered that well in terms of, nobody's in favor of that. But having said that, I think we have to be careful when you're saying something is military grade. I mean, as an owner of, everything from a 50 cal to 308s to 223s, some people classify those as military grade, and I think you have to be careful putting a label on it. So both of us are strong supporters, and I don't disagree with his assessment. We don't want people to have those types of weapons.
Governor Mead, some Republicans, such as former Senator Al Simpson, say the freedom to marry, regardless of gender or sexual orientation, is a uniquely conservative, even Wyoming value, because they see it as an issue of individual freedoms. Do you agree with that, and why or why not?
Well, I disagree with it. As you probably know, Wyoming's marriage law is being challenged right now, and the Attorney General's in that lawsuit and is vigorously defending it. My personal belief is marriage is between a man and a woman, and that's always been the way it is. I respect that Senator Simpson has a different point of view. I also respect that we have to recognize as a state in the same way. It's not a question of whether we have homosexual, gay people in the state of Wyoming. We do, and we have to be respectful of them. But in terms of marriage, I still believe marriage is between a man and a woman.
I agree with Matt on that. Marriage is between one man and one woman, and what's being sought is a marriage license. That's a privilege. In order to get that privilege, you got to meet the standards set for every other individual to get that privilege. In Wyoming, that's one man and one woman, and I will stand on that.
Okay, before we get started on the follow-up questions, I just want to thank Casper Star Tribune opinion editor Jeremy Fugleberg, KCWY's Cody O'Hara, and you guys in the audience for taking the time to come up with some thoughtful follow-up questions based on what you've heard tonight. The first follow-up question is for Dr. Haynes. And Doctor, you've said tonight that there's a need to develop more products from Wyoming coal, including gasoline and diesel. Several private projects to do so haven't gotten off the ground yet. What can you do as governor that they can't?
Most of those, first of all, that's not new chemistry. The Germans made diesel from coal during World War II. We can make, and even without our help, we make natural gas from coal, and then there are processes by which we can facilitate that. The real problem is political. It's regulations. It's not technology. It's not market. It's regulations. We need reasonable regulations. We need to get the EPA out of Wyoming, and I can do that. I can do that in the boardroom. That's the real problem with these new technologies.
Governor Mead.
Well, over the last 3.5 years, we've been looking at coal to gas. We've been looking at gas to liquids. And I have, in terms of which goes first, I suspect that I think gas to liquids probably is going to be going first. But all of them are good. And we had, an example, we had the High Plains Gasification Project at the University of Wyoming with General Electric, which I was supportive of. But because it's an uncertain territory, GE withdrew from that because in order to have that innovation and technology in terms of coal, you also have to know there's a future in it. As my dad would put it, you never want to, vaccinate a dead cow. I mean, you got to know that it's going to live and it's going to thrive. And so I think the rules and regulations certainly have been hampering the ability for some of those innovations, technologies to go forward. But as I said, what we're doing with the Integrated Test Center, we can provide some more opportunities for the slipstream off coal-fired plants, from everything from graphene to fruit products. And we're looking at that along with the Innovation Award to help find the scientists that can find that answer.
Governor Mead, the next question's for you. Do you think it's appropriate for you to use the state airplane during campaigning, even if you say you reimburse the state? At what level do you reimburse the state? And is it at the actual cost of operation?
Yeah, I don't think it's appropriate for me to use it if I'm saying I'm doing it. I think it's appropriate to use it. Just for example, today, we flew to Casper for an Oil and Gas Commission meeting. We left there about 1:30. So when I'm on campaign time, like I am right now, we reimburse the state for the extra time. And on top of that, every month we post the amount of usage of the plane that on the state website for everybody to see. And I think the doctor and I agree on this. I mean, people don't want you to be governor of Cheyenne. They want you to be governor of Wyoming. And I think it's part of the job. You got to travel around the state.
I certainly agree with Matt. I want the governor to be available to the people, and I'm pleased and impressed that he does reimburse the state for cost. So I don't have any problem with his use of the state plane and the way he's handled that.
The next question's for Dr. Haynes. Would you allow education money to follow a student? Why not allow the parents to decide what type of education their children will have?
Answer to the first questions, I would definitely like to see the money follow the student, because what that will do in our public school system is create competition. Competition makes you sharp, makes you better, makes you innovative. Now, what would I do? I would like to have the legislators pass that legislation, and that's how I would need to get that done. And the public will help me get that done.
Governor.
Well, I think that the way we should go is, as we've done, we've tried to support more charter schools, have tried to promote the ability for distance learning. But there's different definitions on follow the student. We have to have strong K through 12. I think it's a responsibility. I think the advantage of charter schools, what they can provide is you're providing education to the same set of students, those that are on the top end and those that are on the bottom end. Provides a great opportunity for innovation and comparisons and for challenges for K through 12. And I think that's what we have seen. I think we can make improvements in charter school and in terms of some of the homeschooling we're doing, some of the distance learning we're doing. And we've seen some of that, but I think that is the better way to go.
Final follow-up question of the night goes to Governor Mead. If you're reelected, will you assure us here tonight that you will never again support any plan to unseat our constitutionally mandated and elected superintendent of public instruction? If not, why not?
Well, certainly. I mean, we talked about that already. You know, it's interesting to me that, you know, shortly before that, the year before that, I was asking the Attorney General to support the term limit law that was on the books, because I actually believe there should be term limits for governors and for the 5 state elected officials. And, you know, the Supreme Court overturned that. There was no move to censure everybody who voted for that. There was no move to have some of the things we've seen. And I think since 1980, I think there's been 15, 18, 20 different bills that have been signed by a governor that have been overturned by the Wyoming Supreme Court. The system works that way. It's checks and balances. And so there was no intent by anyone to do anything unconstitutional. We followed the advice of the Attorney Generals. We followed what we thought was in the Constitution in terms of the legislature defining the duties of the superintendent. So if you're serious, is it a serious question? My serious answer is no. If it's a flippant question, it shouldn't be.
Well, I expect the governor to know the Constitution. And I guarantee you my Attorney General will be at least as strong on the Constitution as I am, and will have what I call a Wyoming heart. A Wyoming heart is, I'm running for this job, I'm applying for this job because I want to take care of you. By taking care of you, I have to be honest to say it takes care of me and my family. So I will always follow the Constitution, and I will work with the legislature as they craft legislation in a professional, quiet way to try and keep them steered on the constitutional path.
Based on the results of the pre-debate coin flip, Dr. Haynes will be allowed to make the first closing statement of the night. Dr. Haynes, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here again, and thanks to the hosts of this, Casper Star, Casper College, and K2 TV. It's a very important civic duty you've performed. I am News 13. It's not K2? It says K2 on the website. I'm sorry. Okay. I'm very sorry. So, thank you. I would like to have you people understand that I am in this for you. I am from the people. I am you, you are me. I grew up on a farm in Louisiana, and I've been blessed by God to march through our free enterprise system. I've been blessed by God to have the most education of anybody ever to seek the governor's office. And I've been blessed by God with the years to turn that education into practical experience. I will turn us to God away from evil, and I will trust the Lord to guide us through these times that are coming upon us from over the seas and from Washington, D.C. I ask for your prayers first and your support second and your vote on August 19th. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Governor Mead, your closing statement this evening.
Well, I want to thank the sponsors as well. I want to thank all of you for being here, and for any who watch it later on Saturday or beyond that for participating. It is important, and debates are important, and it gives us all an opportunity to examine the candidates. I want to again thank Dr. Haynes. He and I don't know each other well, but he's always been a gentleman, and I appreciate his approach to our different points of view. And we have some that are very strong. You know, in addition to saying he was going to drill in Yellowstone, in addition to saying that he was going to arrest federal employees, one of the things that really concerned me is he was putting up our mineral companies and saying, you know, if they paid mineral royalties directly to the federal government, that he was going to stop them from doing that and stop them from doing business. I've spent so much of my time the last 3.5 years making sure that miners continue to mine, that our mineral sector remains strong. This isn't a time for lofty notions that are not going to work. This is a time for real solutions. This is a time to challenge the government, federal government, when they intrude in a way we don't want, in a real way, in a practical way that gets the job done. You know, I grew up on a ranch here in Wyoming. I'm a 4th-generation rancher. And my kids, as I look at them, I want to make sure that this wonderful Wyoming, from our beautiful parks, which I treasure, to our wildlife, to our independent way of life, and independent way of thinking, remains true, remains strong for the generations to come. My grandfather used to say, as told to him by his grandfather, my great-grandfather, in Wyoming, where you find one blade of grass, you leave two. And that's beyond ag. what it is each of us have a duty to leave the place a little better than we found it. That's been my mission my first 4 years, and it'll certainly be my mission the next 4 years. Carol and I, and our kids, it's been a great privilege to serve the state. We want to continue to do that. I don't view this as a career, though. I view it as something you do in. You get in, you do the best you can, you make the tough decisions, and you get out. And so we do want another term. But it's up to the voters of Wyoming, who hopefully agree with us. Wyoming's on the right path. That when you're ranked second best state in terms of how it's run, you're in and you're out, or first best, when you see low unemployment, when you see the low taxes, when you see how we are rated in terms of our business, when you see that we have the lowest poverty rate in the nation when it comes to kids, that we are on the right path. So we'd ask for your vote on August 19th. Thank you again, and thank you, Dr. Haynes.
Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes tonight's debate. Special thanks to Casper College for hosting, and an extra special thanks to Casper College Communications Instructor and Director of Speech and Debate, Doug Hall, who is in charge of timekeeping this evening. Have a good evening. Drive home safe. Please remember to vote on August 19th. Thank you. I thought the format was good.